Gamers, gals, non-binary pals. If there's one thing that I love being above all else, it is a certified hater. And that's what we get to do today by watching the Jay Schmidt video, My Problem with Competitive Yu-Gi-Oh content. I would give it a watch. I saw the little inklings of drama floating around on Twitter the past couple days, and I want to see where it all originated at. Oh my god, it's 30 minutes. My fucking Christ. Okay, I guess I'm getting Adam to edit this one.
There's been a couple of discussions going on over my holidays, and I didn't really dive into it because I was on holidays, and I wanted to see if I could still weigh in on it. I believe it started with this video, which is titled "Why Are We So Bad at Talking About Yu-Gi-Oh?"
Average MPT video,
which then sparked other discussions about like basically how we talk about Yu-Gi-Oh, which is something that I spend a fair amount of time thinking about, and I wanted to join that discussion, and for that I need to, you know, get myself up to date.
So Yu-Gi-Oh content has just sort of shaken out in a very specific way over the last 5 years. Since COVID, and I'd argue maybe a couple of years before that, people have cared a lot more about content creators and their opinion than they've cared about the actual underlying card game. Now, I just want to get out ahead of admitting I'm part of the problem. I think...
Wait, am I watching a reaction to a reaction? We've done it. We've solved content.
Those caring about the progression series in 2020 was a lot more fun than whatever Cecil format was, but it comes at the cost of consistent competitive content.
I will say one thing I'm experiencing, you guys can let me know whether it's something that you guys experience as well or whether my impression is correct. Trading card games are very hard to keep up with. This is one of the reasons why I'm so happy that I've been able to make it my job to do this, to keep up with the game, is simply because like these sort of games, especially with the release schedule in recent years, it's very hard to stay up to date with Yu-Gi-Oh, right? And so doing all of this work on your own is a very, very tough ask.
That's 100% true. Like, I am very lucky that I get to do Yu-Gi-Oh as a quote-unquote full-time job, in the sense where this is basically what I do when I'm not editing for fucking VTubers. But essentially, any trading card game is so difficult to keep up with just because there's constant product just coming out the fucking ass of whatever company you want to play for. Like Magic the Gathering, I literally can't even play Magic the Gathering Commander anymore just because so many sets come out like every other month. Like, we just had the Lost Caverns of Ixalan, and now we're getting like Murder at Markov Manor. I'm just like, what is happening? I don't even know like a quarter of the cards in fucking Ixalan. All I know is that there was like a Mana Crypt in there, and like maybe a Cavern of Souls, and then like I'm like, what's in Murder at Markov Manor? Is it a main set? Is it a side set? Is it Commander legal? Is it standard legal? Is it fucking modern legal? Like I don't fucking know. And I can only imagine that's how like people with actual full-time jobs like look at Yu-Gi-Oh. Like, they turn away for like 1 month, they come back and they're just like, what the fuck is a Fire King?
Set comes out, I have to read through all the cards, I have to evaluate for myself what is good, what is relevant now, what is irrelevant, and you know, all that kind of stuff, right? It's only natural that you go somewhere to look for other input, whether it's go watch a tier list on whatever, go watch a ban list reaction, go watch a set review of the newest set, whatever. This is why people consume content, right? I mean, it only makes sense, right? It's a very natural thing, and I'm sure people do the same in other card games, right? They want someone else to look at this set of 100 new cards into the game and tell them what is good, what is bad. You go to someone, a content creator that you trust. It's a very, very normal thing. I do this. Why would you do everything from scratch when there is resources out there? This is not even exclusive to card games. People do that in every single game. You go watch freaking guides or anything like that just to save time, because time is precious. I would argue if you watch someone who creates good Yu-Gi-Oh content and knows how to explain, you know, why a card is good or why a deck is good, explain it well, and you follow their thought process, you learn how to evaluate things, right?
That's why a lot of these articles mirror the same type of language that you would see in a YouTuber-style breakdown. The people who are writing it are responding to the wants of a community that has largely displayed they want to see the Bussy Boy and Farfa argue for the 50th time more than they want to see a breakdown of what the Sun Avalon combo actually looks like.
Maybe this is just a different perspective because of the kind of community that we've fostered. I'm pretty sure the culture in MBT's chat is different than it is here, but I feel like we don't have that problem. I feel like if I set the tone for it to be a serious discussion, we have serious discussions, right? Like, we can have that. We have the trolling and all that and the pen best deck and all that in the right moments, but I do feel like this could be an issue of different Twitch streamers having just fostered a different community by year-long content creation in a certain way, right?
But one thing we absolutely can
That's true.
change from the perspective of an individual duelist is our mindset. It is good to practice skills like card evaluation that usually don't get tested. It's a strength to be able to elucidate why every single card in your deck is important without pointing whoever's asking to a Jesse Cotton video. And only when that understanding is commonplace will we finally receive Yu-Gi-Oh! Reporting that doesn't read like a Maddox article from 2009.
Okay, I don't know why we're so focused on articles. Maybe that's because he's coming from partially a Magic background, and maybe Magic has a more focused on articles culture, but I'm pretty sure that, like, it's as simple as articles are not the premier way of creating content anymore. If I'm gonna create competitive content, I'm not gonna freaking write an article. Maybe that's just me, but I don't think articles are a 2024 way of really conveying information the best. But, like, does it really matter which form you're conveying the information? I mean,
Yes.
like, there is detailed competitive content out there on YouTube, as simple as that. I think there's a couple issues with competitive Yu-Gi-Oh content that I'm constantly trying to work on or find solutions for. One is that, like, Yu-Gi-Oh is a niche still, even though a relatively big one, and then the people that would actually go and consume in-depth competitive content, I believe, is relatively small. You're putting yourself into a niche within a niche. And I've noticed this in the past. At some point, I remember specifically, I made a video about a very brief introduction to sprites, a very brief introduction to tier elements, right? What do these new decks do, right? When they came out, the fundamentals of the two archetypes, right? And those two videos at the time did really well. And then I made a video a couple weeks later going into more detail on what was the best level 2 normal summon for sprites. People were playing Diva, people were playing Nimbles, people were playing the Dark Beckoning Beast.
Impura, baby!
I made a video talking about comparing those, which is, I would say, a more advanced kind of thing when it comes to competitive content, right? It's much more specific than just learning what do these new broken sprite cards do, what do these new broken element cards do. That video performed horribly, whereas the other two performed relatively well, right? And it's just like, as a content creator, I mean, you can just do the content you want to do, of course, and that's all, but you always try to balance it between the things that actually are well received, right? It feels like when you go into too much detail in your competitive content, the niche becomes too small.
That is 100% true. Outside of exactly, like, maybe games with massive audiences, like League of Legends or Valorant or whatever, where hyper competitive players actually do have a strong stage in which to have their niche within a niche within the community, most people are not very interested in learning the fucking in-depths of sprite or tier list. Most people just want to look at a deck list. They want a general idea of how, like, the combo goes, or how the deck breakdown works, or how, like, the generally sequenced stuff, and they just want to be able to chill out and vibe for the general most part. Most people don't want to look at the fucking percentage nuances. Most people don't want to look at the fucking percentages between Dark Beckoning Beast or a Piera or, like, Capshaw or whatever. Most people just want to be told, this is what you do, here's the spoon going into your mouth, meow, here comes the airplane. It's just, like, most people just do not care for the most part. He can say, like, as a content creator, you can make whatever content you want, that's fine. I'd argue that once you reach a certain size and you start doing content creation full time, that ability becomes less and less possible due to the fact that your income is directly tied to how well your videos do. Like, let's say I'm a full-time YouTuber and, like, I average about, like, 100,000 views per video. If I have, like, a week where I'm getting, like, maybe 20 to 30K per video because I want to create more experimental content, more content that's more creatively fulfilling, that just fucking shoots my income by 4/5. My income goes down by 80% for that month. It is disgusting. That's why most content creators over time are very formulaic in the sort of content that they make. Like, Markiplier kind of does, like, the same Let's Play like 500 trillion times as, like, an easy example, because you don't really need to deviate from the formula if it works for the most part. And again, like, once you reach a certain size, your subscriber growth and viewership growth just only grows exponentially, so there's not even really much of a reason reason to change things up, because if you change things up, then you scare your audience and you're just gonna be fucked. As well as the fact that within the YouTube algorithm, if you have videos that perform poorly back to back, YouTube actually starts recommending your videos less. Yeah, like as a content creator, you're even further incentivized by the system itself to be like, hey, don't do this. You know what I mean?
You're missing the point. MBT is saying you and Jesse are typically outliers in knowledge, but the general Yu-Gi-Oh community isn't too great at critical thinking. I don't know exactly what he's expecting, because I don't think the Yu-Gi-Oh community is like on average more or less stupid or whatever you want to call it than other communities. I think that is just a general thing with modern society, is that like sometimes people rely on others to do the work for them, right? People go online and go watch a deck profile and take the deck and don't do much thinking, right? That's something that people can
I don't want to
do.
think.
This is not
Spoon feed me,
necessarily a
Josh.
problem, though. No
Give
one
me
is
the
hurt by
applesauce.
that. I'm not hurt by the fact that my opponent doesn't know why he's playing the cards that he's playing in his deck because he copied the list somewhere. That's not something that hurts anybody. If anything, this hurts my opponent because at the time where adjustments to the deck need to be done, he would have been better off learning and understanding the game at a fundamental level rather than just copying the deck list, right? And this is what constantly happens when you net deck. By the way, net decking is a great thing, especially when you start playing the game. It's very important. When you start playing the game, when you start learning the game, you need at least somewhat functioning deck to be able to at least not get soul crushed every single game, right? And so like I would argue the better order of learning about this game is you learn how to play it first, and then you understand the background, right? You understand why the cards are there and so on and so forth, because it's much easier to learn those things from actual seeing the stuff in practice, right? You don't learn that much from playing a deck that is not cohesive at all, because the first deck you're going to build yourself is just probably going to suck, right? Because there's 12,000 cards or whatever it is now, right? If you just sit someone down and you're like, okay, here's a starter deck, build a deck, they're not going to learn that much, right? Net decking is great and all, but at the end of the day, usually when it comes to performing well at a competitive level, if you want to take it one step further, you do need to come up with stuff before other people know about it, which isn't usually the case when you net deck, right? Because when you net deck something, it's already out there. That's how you found it, right? You found this deck profile on YouTube. That's why you know about it. Everyone else also knows about it, and you're not going to surprise anyone with it, right? Not that you always need the surprise factor, but innovation in deck building, seeing what other people play and making a deck that's good against that is one of the most important parts of any given format. There's usually a lot of development between tournaments, right? You can't expect to do well at a YCS by just copying the deck that won the last YCS, essentially, right? Because everyone is going to know exactly that list.
Exactly. As well as the fact that the person who won that YCS with that list was teching for people who weren't going to be aware of exactly what he was going to be playing. Like, again, we've seen it happen more than once where deck lists that feel like they just 100% should not have even made it to fucking top cut, much less winning the event, have just managed to scam their way to the top, mainly due to A, player performance and them just being extremely prominent players or able to play at a super high degree, but B, just having a general understanding of their cards and explosive fucking side deck options that other players are just unprepared for. The easiest example I could give is like Dinka Bui's Prank Kids YCS win. Like, let's be fucking real. That list was fraudulent as hell, but again, nobody knew how to fucking beat it or play against it or anything of the like, and it was just like the most crazy bananas thing ever to see happen.
Usually a step that you have to do by yourself. People that try to innovate for the next tournament usually don't put that stuff out on YouTube, right? This is the same thing when you guys come into my chat a week before a YCS and you're like, hey Josh, what are you gonna play? It's a very important thing that I'm not gonna share on stream because it significantly impacts
Coder says
my
you
odds
should
of
share
doing
it.
well, right?
Coder
Instead
says
of
you should
making
share
shit
it.
up
Good
or saying
content.
whatever, I'll tell you guys I don't want to spoil it. You know, I'll give you guys my opinions on things. I'll tell you I like this deck, I don't like that deck, I like that card, I don't like that card, but I'm not gonna be like, okay, this is my list for the next event, because that would significantly change the outcome of my performance, right?
The funny thing is I was talking to Jesse the other day, and he was like, yeah, I was in Joshua Schmidt's stream after I won the regional. And I was like, hey Josh, did you see my deck profile that won the regional? And Josh was like, yeah, you know, I saw it. It was a list. And then he just never talked about it again. And Jesse was like, damn, I really got Donawalled. I think he thinks my deck sucks. And then like 1 week later, Joshua won the YCS. And Jesse was like, I think that's why he didn't really comment about it.
Where was I gonna go with all this? I guess what I'm trying to say is it's each individual's responsibility to learn about the game beyond just, you know, watching a deck profile or net decking the deck from the last YCS. But I do think there is good content out there. There is also not as good content out there.
My content!
Each individual on which they prefer. And I have been thinking about making more in-depth content again. I've been thinking about what's the best way to make competitive Yu-Gi-Oh content. But the thing is, at this point in time, I feel like there's a gap between the best possible competitive content and then the content that will perform the best on YouTube. You're not incentivized to go and make a 2-hour video on how to build a side deck from scratch or anything like that, you know? The thing that I've experienced is that sort of stuff, I really enjoy doing it on stream. Because I feel like when we go into such a deep talk, it really helps having chat interaction and it really helps being live because people are interested when you talk about it in detail. I think it's not easy to get someone to click on a 2-hour how to make a side deck video, but it's very easy to have an engaging discussion live on stream. Time flies when you talk about this game, right? I think this is a good bridge into some of the other stuff. There was a comment here that said, personally, I want a channel that just does a 2-hour deep dive on each deck with what hands it likes, matchups guidance, side deck advice, all that. This sparked a tweet by Gareth Shear, who does or Shire, I'm not entirely sure, who does these feature match analysis videos, which are, by the way, great content. Shout outs to Gareth. I personally enjoy those, and the community is receiving them relatively well, and it's sparked a lot of discussion, and there was a video by APS on it that I wanted to check out as well.
Oh my god, the second reaction.
Discussed on Yu-Gi-Oh Twitter recently, and that is the difficulty with making competitive Yu-Gi-Oh content on YouTube. Or to be more specific, the difficulty with making in-depth, long-form competitive Yu-Gi-Oh content on YouTube.
Again, the spoiler alerts for why it doesn't exist. It performs very badly. Well, let's just take this layer by layer. Yu-Gi-Oh is already an extremely tight niche, so there's not even that many eyes on this game. Like, at best, views will, like, a good Yu-Gi-Oh video will get about maybe 100,000 views. That is the benchmark for a high-watched YouTube video for Yu-Gi-Oh. When in reality, like, in the general scope of, like, YouTube, large audiences, like, you're getting 400, 600, 1 million views, like, on average, for what's considered a large or extremely well-performing video. B, competitive Yu-Gi-Oh is already such a tight fucking niche, as well as the fact that competitive anything is extremely tight. C, most people don't want to watch videos above like 10 minutes. That is just like a fact of life, as most people's attention spans kind of cap out around like the 20-minute mark when it comes to watching content they're actually interested in. Once it passes that 20-25-minute mark, you basically reach a point where you better make some god-tier fucking content that's so soul-pulling that people are actually willing to break the statistical average for their attention span, rather than, you know, just click off or whatever. Or else, you know, your fucking audience is just gonna like take a hike. And D, extremely long form content costs so much money. Not just in the production cost, but in opportunity cost as well. Think about it. As a YouTuber, would you rather make like 5 to 10, like 8 to 10 minute videos that you can guarantee are gonna get really high views, or at least like pretty solid views? Or are you gonna take a gamble with your month's income and spend 1 to 2 months crafting this super in-depth like 2 to 3 hour video essay that may or may not even do that well? Again, I'm not saying that there aren't people who are able to make a living doing that. I mean, look at like H-Bomber Guy or like Wendigoon, but these people are very much the exceptions to the rule. For every one Wendigoon, there's like 5 trillion skibbity toilet, has-been hotel, hell of a boss content farms. You know what I mean?
One other thing I want to say, by the way, if people create the content that MBT is quote-unquote criticizing, right, the not very in-depth, what's it called, surface level, right, if they enjoy making the content and people enjoy watching the content, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I don't think this is excluding each other, right? If there's enough people for in-depth competitive content, I mean, I feel like that's one of the reasons why my channel has grown, because there is interest in competitive content to some level. I don't know if you or if I need to go much deeper, and if that's going to reach more people, or if I'm going to scare people away, because not everyone is as deep into the game, and that's fine, right? And it's completely okay to make content for the people that don't want to go as in depth or anything like that, right? But I do think there's a fair point that there's more casual content than competitive content by a lot, but there's also a lot more people that play Yu-Gi-Oh occasionally, maybe even casually, than super competitively. So I think it makes sense.
And then you finally release this 2-hour-long magnum opus that is just exactly what anybody would want if they're an Unchained player, right? How to make boards, how to break boards, how to deal with matchups, how to recover, all the different meta stuff. Then a ban list comes out. And suddenly, this huge piece of like super in-depth, nitty-gritty, hardcore, competitive content for a pretty popular deck that perhaps a lot of people want to watch is outdated. Why would I watch this video now if, you know, the Unchained deck is completely different?
That's a fair point. On another hand, I feel like I can only speak for myself, but most YouTube videos do most of their views very, very early on in the first couple days, maybe first 1 or 2 weeks. Afterwards, it drops significantly in terms of how much it's watched, how much it, like revenue wise and all that. However, there's a difference. If your video stops getting views after 2 weeks, maybe that's okay if it's a video that, you know, isn't as high effort. If you put infinite hours into a big video, you ideally would want it to be watchable over the course of a couple months, you know. So I kind of get that. I don't think this completely throws me off of the idea of making competitive content, but it is definitely an argument.
There are like 2 types of content that exist in the world. There's evergreen content, which is content that basically lasts forever and you can watch historically over the course of fucking human history, basically whenever. The easiest example I could give for evergreen content is stuff like cooking channels, because it's not like there's gonna be a fucking cooking metagame change. Like there may be like new TikTok trends for like cooking or whatever, but for the most part, cooking is a very standard thing where the only thing that changes is maybe the amount of recipes that exist in the world, and people are just sharing that sort of knowledge with the world. And you can always go back and watch like how to make a red chili sauce from Internet Shaquille, because it's not like there's gonna be a ban on fucking sriracha chilies or whatever the fuck. By the way, please watch Internet Shaquille. I used to work for him. Amazing boss. And the second type of content I would describe is flavor of the day slop. Funnily enough, best way I would describe it is the guy I work for, Nux. I work for his side channel in the sense where it's mainly just like reactions and that sort of deal. But this is the sort of content that Josh is more referring to, in which views for these types of videos don't steadily increase over time like they might with Internet Shaquille, because, you know, his sort of content is perpetually evergreen. This sort of content gets like 50 to 100,000 views in like 10 minutes, and then after 3 days will just it will just die. And I think that both types of content have a very specific place in the YouTube atmosphere. Like again, I think that reactionary slop is very, very important, as much as evergreen content is important to make. However, I think that Yu-Gi-Oh is in this unfortunate spot that because of how fast new product comes out and how relatively fast ban lists and stuff get dropped, that there's no real place for evergreen content to really exist outside of like maybe historical lookbacks, like with the Garrett 5 videos or with Swag Kage's second channel in regards to like the history of the Yu-Gi-Oh metagame. You know what I mean?
Wouldn't people do it if they were passionate still, right? Like if I'm just a huge Unchained guy and like I really love this deck to death, I could still make that video and maybe I could even update the video or something.
I mean, people do that though. That's the thing. There's not as many of these people out there than they are, for example, casual content creators or anything like that, or more surface level content creators. But people do that, right? The entire channels are dedicated to specific decks. Pack was in chat for a couple minutes ago saying like he literally made a super in detail video on Unchained, how to like combo around Nib, best line against the Bystial, and so on and so forth. Like the content is out there. It's just that, like I said, it's very niche. The only way you could make competitive content really work on YouTube is if you made it appealing to more casual viewers as well, which is very, very hard for super competitive content because it is sometimes a very dry subject.
That is true. Like there are one-trick channels that exist. When I was learning Hero, I used to play Hero for a little bit, by the way. When I was trying to learn Hero, when the Wake Up Your Elemental Hero stuff came out, and I joined like the Hero subreddit, and I joined like the Hero Discord, the amount of channels that literally their entire goal is to just teach you every single possible hero combo is absolutely insane. There were like 50 fucking videos. There's like 1 card starters with Ferris, like 1 card starters with like Stratos into whatever, or like 2 card starters, Fusion Destiny plus Stratos, or anything like that. It was absolutely insane to have basically a guide on how to play every single hand possible in Hero, assuming you don't get fucking nibiru'd. Again, this sort of content only appeals to people who are looking to play this deck at an extremely high competitive level, and unfortunately that's just not everyone. As well as the fact fact that I don't want to be that guy, but most of these videos kind of do look like shit. When you look at a video like this, like it's literally just a camera pointed down and it's just, okay, so here's how you do this combo and this card will activate this card. Like nothing changes. Like this is content that could have been made in 2005 with a fucking Sony camcorder pointed down, and I wouldn't have even batted an eye, and I would have been like, yep, that looks like a video that came out in 2005.
You need to care about Unchained a lot to be able to watch, I don't know, 30 minutes, an hour or whatever of a video breaking down different Unchained combos on how to play around Nip, how to play around Druis, where I'm like, why would I watch that if I'm not into Unchained, right? And if your potential viewer base goes from all the Yu-Gi-Oh players to just the people that play Unchained, it's a massive hurdle to get over, you know? My approach to that sort of thing is I try to cover a lot of different things, and I would like to say that it's not surface level. Obviously, I don't do super in detail how to play this deck for 2 hours or something like that, right? But what I try to do is I try to put aspects of competitive Yu-Gi-Oh into those videos, right? I try to make it still watchable for people that are not as in-depth, but it still adds solid reasoning or solid actual advice into it, rather than just like, you know, play this card because it's broken or something like that, to kind of try and get the best of both worlds. Because at the end of the day, someone who wants to learn about competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, you do need to put some effort in yourself. Even if there is a 2-hour Unchained guide out there, watching it is not going to make you the best Unchained player out there, you know? Like, that's not how it works. A lot of Yu-Gi-Oh is understanding the game as a whole and then transferring it into actual games and deck building, right? I always say that Yu-Gi-Oh on a very macro level consists of 2 very important skill sets, which is like one skill set that is like knowledge of the current format, understanding new cards, staying up to date, and then the other skill set is something you adapt over time, is a general understanding of the game, deck building concepts, how side decking works, that kind of stuff, right? And I feel like a lot of people always focus on, I need to learn what everything in the format does. I'm not trying to work on myself as a player on a greater scale. I feel like a lot of people focus on the one aspect rather than the other. And now that I'm thinking about it, I do think there is a chance you could create like evergreen content about like the format overarching skill set, like how do you actually become a good Yu-Gi-Oh player, rather than learning Unchained or learning Snake Eyes for the next format. It's much harder to do, and it's also much harder to make content for that. That skill set is super important, and I think maybe that's what MBT also meant, is that people don't really have that sort of transferring knowledge from format to format. They don't actually learn how to play Yu-Gi-Oh, they just learn how to play a specific deck. This is why articles are the way to go. They are easier to update and more convenient to parse. You're not wrong if you just put this down as like a written thing and for everyone to access at any time. It's true, you just gotta face reality and be like, if I write an article now, it's way harder for that to ever be monetized in a way a YouTube video would be.
Also, you're expecting Yu-Gi-Oh players of all people to read an article? I'm sorry, but you're on stronger drugs than I will ever be.
Let's face it, it is a problem, right? Because people aren't incentivized to just share their in-depth knowledge about a deck, their lines or anything like that for like nothing in return. Patreon is an option. Patreon could be an option. There's probably ways if you really wanted to do it. That's the whole thing. We're just listing arguments for and against it, or like problems that do exist, hurdles that do exist. I do want to do in-depth competitive content, but I do still need to justify spending the time for it. So basically the issue is not that it's impossible to do it. Of course it's possible to do it. The thing is you have to find the time and you have to justify doing it. You have to find someone that's willing to do it and also capable of doing it, because not everyone could, and then that person has to be incentivized to do it over other things, you know? Because for example, I have had a time where I gave coaching, right? People would message me about coaching and I'd say like, okay, I don't have that much time, but I can do it, right? And then I did it for a while, and then I realized I would much rather spend the time teaching all of the people live on stream rather than one individual, right? It felt more rewarding to stream and build up the stream community rather than get paid by one person to get coaching, right? And so like I was at that moment more incentivized to go live on stream and create content that way than to give one person super in-depth, you know, whatever, right?
Funny thing is about coaching is that not a lot of people actually want to be like coached on the game. A lot of people, again, just want to be given that super secret sauce. All right, what's like the secret hack for me to gain like 10,000 LP in like a single day? Or what's the super secret deck list that I could use to to play at this locals in order to basically win the YCS or whatever. I used to fucking elo boost people, and there's like an option where you as an elo booster can like chat to your clients or whatever. And I think out of like all the times, exactly like 1 or 2 people have ever been like, hey, why did you take like these runes when you're playing like Master Yi? Or like, why did you go like this item build when like blitz.gg is saying to go like that item build? And like I would be like, oh well, I like going the offensive rune tree over like inspiration because I think that the boots aren't really necessary, and I think Master Yi has like a weaker early game and you need the combat prowess, blah 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 blah, that sort of deal. But most people are very much just like, all right, tell me the best runes to take this season, tell me the best runes to take this patch, tell me the best champions to play this patch, like what should be my jungle route every single game. And I'm like, oh, it kind of depends, and it's like really dependent on like how your team comp is and like how competent your team is. And they're just like, no, just tell me your basics. I'm like, fine, whatever, go here. Like most people don't really actually want to learn, they just want to be spoon-fed the information.
Maybe there is ways to make a concept that works like that, you know, possible, but I don't think it's been done yet.
YouTube's really big on like, you know, how long do people watch? Are you actually going to sit and watch this 2-hour-long monster of a video about a given deck?
One thing that is true is that I don't think you would need everyone to watch the video for 2 hours for it to be profitable, because I mean, of course, with a 2-hour video comes more ad breaks and all that kind of stuff, more revenue with more watch time and all that. But still, I feel like, and it's still something that I'm not super confident in saying these things, like I don't understand the freaking YouTube algorithm, but I could imagine if you made like a mixture, like if I on my channel, right, like I do a lot of 10, 15, 20-minute videos, and if I then upload a 2-hour competitive guide
it would
to
bomb.
Bystial Runick, for example, and it's like, okay, a bunch of people watch the entire 2 hours, but a lot of people are gonna watch like 20 minutes or anything like that and then leave. I don't know what this does to the algorithm. So even if that video would probably earn fine money, like it'd be okay probably, would that be a good way of doing the content in the long run? Because I've heard plenty of times, I don't have enough experience myself yet with YouTube to say whether it's true or not, but I've heard plenty of times that you're incentivized to create the same kind of content over time, right? Because you want similar watch times across your videos. You want everyone to click on your videos, but you don't want half of your subscribers to not care about a video, so on and so forth. You know what I mean?
Joshua Schmidt is 100% right in the sense where YouTube absolutely hates content that varies in video length and watch time. Because the main metric that YouTube really uses to promote videos is not views anymore. It hasn't been views for an extremely long period of time. It's always now watch time. It's always watch time and watch percentage. If you have a video that's like 8 minutes long that has 100% watch time from A to Z versus a video that's 2 hours long that has 50% watch time from 0 to 1 hours rather than from 0 to 2 hours or whatever, YouTube will fucking put that 1 hour video and throw it in the fucking dumpster before they ever promote that shit ever again. One of my friends, Susu JPEG, well, I mean like acquaintances, but whatever. She used to, for a really long while, she used to only upload like clips or like 2-minute things, and whenever she would upload anything over like 8 minutes, that video would just fucking bomb. Again, the watch retention wasn't perfect, it was too long of a video length, that sort of deal. And you basically just had to ask yourself, am I going to pussy out and just go back to making my 30-second to 1-minute clips, or am I going to just brute force 10 to 20-minute content down YouTube's throat until my algorithm gets fixed? And some people go one way and Susu went the other way. So unless you're able to consistently pump out 2-hour videos like every 5 minutes, it's just not realistic to ever expect a channel to be making these super in-depth primers the way that Yu-Gi-Oh! Twitter or Schmidt or PaulAPS or whoever is asking for them wants them to be.
But it does suck if you are the competitive
Also, thanks
type
for the
who
raid.
wants information and wants it in depth and still wants to get it from your favorite content creator. They are not incentivized to do it, so where then could you find it?
That's
well,
true.
MBT pointed this out on Twitter, and some other people agreed, and I've said this for a while myself, that it would be nice if there was a place for hardcore competitive Yu-Gi-Oh content that's kind of divorced from the whims of YouTube. Because while a Yu-Gi-Tuber might not be incentivized to make your 2-hour-long, perfect, complete, unchained guide. Sorry, I just keep using that deck because it's on hand. But even though a Yu-Gi-Tuber might not really be incentivized to do it just based on how the algorithms work and kind of what pays the bills, maybe there could be a site that kind of focuses on that instead. And that is where sites like TCG Player come up. It's also where kind of
I'm gonna pause that real quick.
devout communities like your Unchained Discord or your Insert Archetype here Discord come in, and so those do exist, and I think that is a valuable resource. but it does sort of suck that we in the Yu-Gi-Oh space do not get as much competitive coverage and like in-depth competitive information as we probably could, and it's just because making that information is so difficult when it's really racing against the clock.
Some of it really does make sense. Some of it doesn't really make that much sense though, because on one hand, like you're saying, okay, the problem is a lot of people want the content, but people are not incentivized to make the content, which makes sense at first glance and is true in some aspects, but at the same time, if enough people wanted the content, then you would be incentivized to make it. Like if there was enough people out there looking for hardcore competitive content, you could easily make it work on YouTube. You just had to make it your thing. So I think part of the problem that we haven't talked about is that there are maybe, and this is a maybe, I don't know the exact numbers, but maybe there are not enough people out there. Maybe the audience is not broad enough for that sort of content. Maybe that's something you have to face, you know, like maybe that's a reality you have to think about, that like, yes, they do exist, hardcore competitive players, but maybe they're not enough, because there are niches for content creation that are simply too small. I do think that's a thing. Maybe certain small, very small old games or certain communities, they exist, but they're not big enough to actually incentivize people to make YouTube content.
Yeah, exactly. Just 100%. Most competitive content just doesn't really exist for this reason. It's a niche within a niche within a niche. That might as well just be the whole video. Why aren't people making this sort of content? There's just not enough audience to justify putting the time or resources into it. That's just the reality. Like Roklo said, I used to do higher level competitive analysis on YouTube, but the views started strong and they tanked steadily. Yeah, it's just like you're just reached with this point where you're just faced with the question of, am I going to keep pumping out content that's literally never going to reach an audience where it could be self-sustaining in the form where I could just be a full-time content creator? Or am I just gonna, like, you know, just accept that consumer tastes have gone differently? And for better and for worse, she chose the latter option, where she decided to change her content with consumer tastes. And now have me like, look at me, bro. I do fucking reaction content like 90% of the time. Like let's not pretend like I'm exactly free of sin here.
And the hyper competitive Yu-Gi-Oh scene could be just that. Maybe it's not enough to actually maintain a YouTube presence or anything like that, whatever you want to call it, you know?
As for me, I made the conscious decision years ago actually to shoot for evergreen casual Yu-Gi-Oh content. My goal on YouTube ultimately is to grow, is to reach a lot of people, is to kind of spread the general Yu-Gi-Oh gospel to as many eyes and ears as possible.
The gospel,
and so
my God.
I figured that the best way to do that would be to make, you know, much more casual, broadly appealing content that has a bit of a longer shelf life to it.
I mean, let's face it, that was, from their perspective, probably the right decision. You know, it did work better. If you look at current Yu-Gi tubing, you know, the quote-unquote casual, without that being meant as an insult whatsoever, the casual channels are much bigger than the other ones, right? If you look at Team Sam, you look at Simo, you look at APS, those are some of the biggest Yu-Gi tubing channels out there, because that sort of content just has a broader audience, right? They don't get everyone in the Yu-Gi-Oh space, you know, because some more competitive players don't like the too casual content, you know what I mean? Like, not everyone wants that as well, but there certainly are large portions of people out there that want that sort of content, right? But when it comes to competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, I just think what they're asking for here is like, okay, and I do notice that myself, is that the people that do create competitive content, let's say Pack or myself or Jesse or anything like that, we are not incentivized to go as in detail as we potentially could, if that makes sense, right? If YouTube incentivized me, or if Twitch incentivized me to do it, I could make much more in-detail content, in-depth content than I currently am doing, right? Because that's just a thing on YouTube, is that at the end of the day, you do have to be somewhat entertaining, and I try, and I hope it works. I hope you guys enjoy the streams and all that kind of stuff, but I feel like there always has to be that sort of balance, right? You can be super entertaining, and then the quality of your information doesn't matter as much, but on the other end of the spectrum, I think there is a barrier, because the quality of your information can be super high, but you can't be completely non-entertaining. I feel like that is something that doesn't really work. So it works on the one end, and this is why we have the extremes on the other end. This is why we have the super casual content creators, because that works. As long as you're entertaining, as long as you're funny, you can do super casual content and it works out. On the other end of the spectrum, you still get better results if you are at least somewhat entertaining and don't go into too much detail, right? I like Wolfie. He combines this good for Pokemon. I think Wolfie is the exact same thing. Wolfie could make much more in-depth content if he was incentivized to do so, but he's finding a balance as well. Like, you can't tell me Wolfie's not trying to be entertaining.
I'd argue, like, this is kind of like me being a nitpicky bitch. I would 100% argue that you very much can be one side of the super extremely competitive in-depth spectrum if you're not that entertaining. But this is just because I come from a League of Legends background. Like, I grew up in the fucking era of when Dyrus and like Gosu were the most watched people on fucking Twitch with like 10,000 people. And like all Dyrus would do was be like, all right, I think I'm gonna go proxy with Singed. Or like Gosu would just have no cam, no mic, EDM or anime music blaring in the background while he fucking grinded Vayne for like the 80th hour that day. Like, if I had to describe like how the current Yu-Gi-Oh sphere works, there's like evergreen, reaction slop, competitive, casual. It's like the 4-point axis graph, and like DB Grinder would probably be somewhere around here. His content is very competitive leaning, but it's very much designed to be consumed in the moment or within the one specific format. Like, nobody really goes back to watch DB Grinder videos, you know what I mean? Joshua Schmidt is kind of in a weird spot. Maybe it's like right here. He's not, I don't watch enough Jay Schmidt content. This is how you can tell I really don't watch Jay Schmidt. But like someone like Farfa is very much within like right here, where like it's way more casual and way more flavor of the week type deal. And like Team APS is very much like this spectrum, where like they make evergreen content in the sense where like their shorts are like Yu-Gi-Oh player finds out what tax evasion is, but it's like designed very much for like the casual audience, you know what I mean? Half of Farfa's content is casting tournaments. Ain't no way it is. Stream segment, okay, stream highlight, paid sponsorship, stream highlight, paid sponsorship, stream highlight. Oh my god, original content. God damn.
Just feel bad when I see newer creators put a lot of time and effort into making like a where to hand trap guide or a super guide or whatever to X deck or an analysis of an event, and then just sort of see that work kind of go down the drain after a few days.
I mean, that's another thing you have to realize is like that content does exist, right? It's in my recommended feed a bunch of times, but that sort of content into that direction, it does exist. It's a thing people do. It's just something that naturally it doesn't perform as much for a reason, right? I think it's very natural
because there's
that
no audience
content
for
creators
it.
have to find some sort of balance between, you know, going into too much detail and being somewhat entertaining and also appealing to people that want to learn the game at a surface level and not start by, you know, watching an Unchained 2-hour guide or anything like that, right? I think the reality is that people that are interested in super highly competitive content are usually the people that are more willing to invest more time and effort into achieving their goals, right? Because it's like, if you're a casual Yu-Gi-Oh player, you're not willing to work for, you know, certain things, but if you're a competitive player, you are more willing to go out there and look for the information. Even though it's harder to find, I think it is out there. You know, people come into my chat. We have in-depth talks like this one constantly, right? This is kind of like the solution, quote unquote, that I've implemented for myself. Like, I really enjoy these high-level discussions that we do have on stream fairly often. They simply don't make it to YouTube all the time because, like I said, the stuff doesn't always perform on YouTube as it does on Twitch. And like on Twitch, I noticed that while we're having those discussions, people don't leave the stream, right? People find it interesting once they get drawn into the discussion. Even someone who maybe considers themselves more casually, if you have a back and forth discussion and you ease them into the topic, it's fine for them to even watch it. Drops under 2K exactly this moment. Okay, fair enough.
So it makes it a little bit less incentivizing for a person to focus hardcore on, like, you know, really getting that nitty-gritty competitive stuff going.
So just to get this to a close, like I said, competitive content is tough to make. I think it's tough to make because I personally would love to. You guys know, whenever we have in-depth discussions about Yu-Gi-Oh, I love that shit so much. I can drag that shit for 2 hours. Like, we've had those talks on stream, right? You remember the talks. I love talking about this game in as much detail as you guys want, and I've been constantly thinking how to make more of that sort of content because I would love love to. There's nothing I would love to do more than go even more in detail on the content that I do about Yu-Gi-Oh, right? In my current position, I don't feel super incentivized to make that happen on YouTube. I've been thinking about making it a more regular segment on stream where I look for topics beforehand that we can talk about, that we can discuss, to not only teach you guys about stuff that's currently going on, but like the fundamentals of the game itself. There's not that much like, okay, how do you actually become a good Yu-Gi-Oh player? Because you're not going to be a good Yu-Gi-Oh player if you learn one specific deck, if you learn one specific meta. That stuff is important.
False.
And it's repeated
I'm
work
one
you have to
trick
do
labyrinth.
over and over
I'm
and
the
over
best.
again. But the most important thing probably is learning something along the way so that you don't start every format from scratch. Oh, like they banned my deck, now what do? I start from zero. That's not what happens, right? That's not what I do when my deck gets hit on a ban list or when my deck is not the best deck anymore. I don't start from zero, right? Because you learn. I've been playing this game for like whatever 20 years or some shit. There's more to this game than learning one specific deck or one specific combo or like perfecting a list for one tournament, right? What I can say is that that stuff is always in the back of my mind. Don't say old. You guys are all, most of you are the same age. I know the statistics, okay? Anyways, that is it for this discussion.
If your audience doesn't have the competitive experience, it also goes down the shitter. That's true to a very strong degree. Yeah, that's just true. I've experimented with making like competitive content on my channel where I've talked about like YCSs or I've talked about like YCS results or blah 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 blah. And for the most part, those videos kind of fucking bombed. Those videos did not do very good for the most part, just because again, there's not really that much of a fucking audience for competitive Yu-Gi-Oh content, at least specifically on my channel. My channel is mainly made up of fucking clip leeches, weeaboos, and gambling addicts who just happen to like Yu-Gi-Oh, and we watch the same content and we get to share in that market together. But I'm not gonna pretend like my audience was the most competitively inclined. Farfa's audience, MBT's audience, like Coder's audience, those audiences are very much not in line with competitive discussion. Jay Schmidt's audience very much is, because they watch Jay Schmidt because he's a pro player and has very good insight of the game and blah 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 blah. Jay Schmidt doesn't post extremely in-depth competitive content because, again, back to the fucking beginning, there just isn't that much of an audience for competitive content that's hyper in-depth in the first place. That's just the reality of the game that we play. And to claim otherwise, at least in the current state of content and the game, unfortunately just isn't very realistic. At least that's just my perspective. But anyways, let me know why you think I'm wrong and should be, I don't know, fucking axed at the stake and be sacrificed on the altar of Jay Schmitterson. Good video by Jay Schmidt, good discussion. I enjoyed it a lot. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next video.